Hello, I'm reading from the book Flat Stanley, which was one of my favourite books when I was a childhood. Yeah, Hello, I'm reading from Flat Stanley, which is one of my favourite books from my childhood. I've also worked in year two quite a lot, where it's one of their books and where they teach a whole half-term scheme of work on it. So this is halfway through the book. Stanley and Arthur were in the park. The day was sunny but windy too, and many older boys were flying beautiful enormous kites with long tails, made in all the colours of the rainbow. Arthur sighed. "Some day," he said, "I will have a big kite, and I will win a kite flying contest and be famous like everyone else. Nobody knows who I am these days." Stanley remembered what his parents had said. "Be nice to him, you're his big brother after all." He went to a boy whose kite was broken and borrowed a large spool of string. "You can fly me, Arthur," he said. "Come on." He attached the string to himself and gave Arthur the spool to hold. He ran lightly across the grass, sideways to get up speed, and then he turned to meet the breeze. Up, 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 up went Stanley, being a kite. He knew just how to manage on the gusts of wind. He faced full into the wind if he wanted to rise, and let it take him from behind when he wanted speed. He had only to turn his thin edge to the wind, carefully, a little at a time, so that it did not hold him, and then he would slip gracefully down towards the earth again. Arthur let out all the string, and Stanley soared high above the trees, a beautiful sight in his pale sweater and bright brown trousers against the pale blue sky. Everyone in the park stood still to watch. Stanley swooped right and then left in long matched swoops. He held his arms by his sides and zoomed to the ground like a rocket and curved up again towards the sun. He side-slipped and circled and made figure eights and crosses and a star. Nobody has ever flown the way Stanley Lamb Chop flew that day. Probably no one ever will again. So that's one adventure that Flat Stanley gets up to in the original book. But there are also lots of other books, lots of other adventures of Flat Stanley. So what would be a really nice idea would be to get the children to think of their own adventure, and really about also the positives and negatives about being flat, and all the other things he gets up to in the book which are positive and negative, and how can they come up with their own ideas of what fun he could have, or what mischief he could get up to if he was, or how helpful he could be if he was flat. So what other things they could do. You could also get the children to think about predicting what would come next. Also discussing the sequence of events in the book. You could get them to try and put things in order, because he does have a few adventures just in that book, so you could look at that. And that's really it. There are also lots of other ideas. All the different verbs, the way he zoomed as a kite, he zoomed, he circled, all those sort of verbs you could look at as well. So that's just one of the ideas, but there are so many ideas that you could do based on that book. Because there's another bit in the story where some criminals steal a painting from the famous museum. So one idea I found was to create a wanted poster to help identify the criminals, so you could get the children to describe the criminals. So that's another idea. Or he goes off to America, so you could get them to write a diary about what he does in America. And so like on Monday, the following day, the day after that, things like that. So those are just a few ideas. Okay, so thank you very much.